Welcome everybody to what makes an AFO a balanced AFO, powered by LER Expo. I'm Rich Dubin. Many of you know that already. I'm the founder and publisher of Lower Extremity Review, and we're super proud to be working with Orthotica on this series of events. Anyway, I'm going to really turn it over to Jason Krause, co-founder of Orthotica Labs.
Great. Glad to be here. Glad to always be able to count on LER Expo to help give us a foundation for providing education to the professional lower extremity community. This is an inaugural event that Orthotica is sponsoring. We're going to do once a month webinars similar to tonight on a whole variety of topics. I'll share those topics with you at the end of the meeting as we're wrapping up. And the idea here is really to help provide very practical, useful information. There's a lot of, it's a multidisciplinary audience. I've seen CPO, I've seen CPEDs and podiatrists, and then also some practice administrators as part of our attendee list tonight. And what we're trying to do is provide a really practical cross-section of what is involved in adding fall prevention and balance bracing into clinical practice. For those of you who have never done it, I think this will be enlightening. For those of you who have dabbled, I think you'll wind up getting really useful plurals that you can apply tomorrow. And for those of you who are really just being first exposed to it, this is a good foundation, both technically, clinically, and we'll cover subjects such as billing and compliance, staff role, and a whole slew of other important facets of really doing a good job at bringing fall prevention services into your clinical practice setting. So without really tying up any of Dr. Moore's time, let me turn the microphone over, and I'll join you at the end, and I'll give you other ways that you can source additional information in addition to the webinars, as well as schedule private consultative support following each of our monthly meetings or in between each of our monthly meetings.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get our presentation up and ready here. And I'm very pleased to be with you. And obviously, this is something that I have talked a lot about over the years. And this is something that's certainly a passion of mine. And not only is this topic something that is meaningful to me from a clinical basis, but it's been something that has really defined a lot of my career and practice, and it's been extremely rewarding. And I think that if you've ever really worked with seniors with, again, just putting in place an algorithm of treatment, just if nothing else is, if all you do is simply recommend a shoe, I mean, you can really make people feel good about someone caring about their condition. And so I'm glad to be here with you. And I thank you, Rich and Jason, for the introduction. What I want to try to achieve in this short time that we have is to really provide a kind of a big overview of the things that we're going to be talking about in the months to come. And for those of you that are on the call, I work with, I have two CPEDs that work with us in our practice. We have a large podiatry practice. We've worked with CPOs. In fact, I've employed several CPOs over the year in a wide variety of services for bracing. And so I'm glad you're here, and I hope that you gain something from this. And if I don't touch on what you're interested in, I bet you it's going to be in one of the future topics. But I'm going to try to be broad tonight and give everyone kind of an overview as to kind of why we're talking about these things and why it's important. And it's really, really cool at this point and here in 2023. I've been talking about this since 2009. And when I started talking about this, there were, not everyone was on board, but if you do just a cursory Google search of balance brace or balance AFO, you will see a multiplicity of products and devices that are being made by many people and many companies that were very hesitant to jump on board with this concept. But thanks to a lot of good studies and thanks to time and, of course, a lot of utilization of this concept, I think the concept's been proven. Now, what I want to do in this short period of time is talk about these things, and we're going to go fast just to give an overview of kind of, what this concept's about. Many of you may be on this call thinking, well, all I'm going to talk about is how AFOs are the only thing you do for balance. That is absolutely not the case. I could spend hours talking about the multifactorial causes of falls. What we're aiming to do here is to talk about really what makes an AFO a balance AFO. Why does it work? Why has it worked after all these years? And why I think the more balanced brace remains the standard in that regard. And we'll show you some key characteristics of the more balanced brace and why I think it's most certainly the best product out there. And we'll also just mention very briefly why footwear is important from a lower extremity standpoint. So I'm going to be focusing on lower extremity components of fall prevention. And when you look at this slide and you look at this poster that Orthotica created, I have this poster in literally dozens of rooms in our practices. This really strikes people, and people understand when they see this. This is a practice that cares about falls, and they actually can do something about it. And I am really thrilled to have these kind of posters in my office, and it's been gratifying for many years to be able for patients to see and hear that we're involved in, at least to some extent, addressing falls and the fall risk. So now what I want to do is I'm going to show you highlights of where this all began. And among the first studies ever done using the more balanced brace was done all the way back in 2014. Remember, the brace really kind of came into existence in about 2008, 2009. So very early on, there was lots of interest and lots of criticism, but a lot of interest, and there was a lot of studies done. And this was one that really started off, I think, a lot of discussion about why braces, why can a brace or why can an ankle foot orthosis be effective for balance. And ultimately, it comes down to postural stability. And when you put people in this device, you're going to enhance postural stability. And in just about every instance, the question is what else does it do? And I think studies, of course, have borne out over the years that not only are you addressing stability around the ankle, but you're also, of course, improving confidence, improving gait speed. You're reducing foot drop and foot shuffling, a whole host of things that we're achieving by using an AFO. Fast forward to really a definitive article that demonstrated the effectiveness of the AFO for balance using the MBB. And again, this one published in Gerontology. And again, we could spend lots of time talking about these studies. I'm just going to kind of give you a few highlights. In that, when they looked at this study, within the AFO intervention group, the fall scale was reduced significantly, increased trend in the number of walking bouts compared to baseline, and ultimately you saw a reduced center of mass sway, which is basically postural sway. Ultimately, it's the things that we would expect to see, and it's things that I've been seeing clinically. But when you do a study like this and it's published in Gerontology, this isn't fantasy land. It's not something that someone's making up. It's reality, and it's demonstrated in these studies. And ultimately, the study demonstrated and revealed that older adults with poor balance at baseline and higher daily adherence to using the AFO will gain benefit from AFO intervention. And there's lots of reasons, and we can go through those studies. But when we look at just an overview of a variety of different studies like this one, that talks about how ankle foot orthosis enhance proprioception, the ankle joints, of course, being close to the proximity of the center of mass, and then the ankle plays this integral role in maintaining balance. And that's what really, really kind of started this whole thing. I saw that some of you are on the call are therapists. My wife is an occupational therapist who became falls certified at Emory through a really good program. And I, digging through her materials after she got back, I kept seeing ankle strategy, lower extremity stability that's and proprioceptive issues that cause poor balance. And I kept thinking to myself, well, why isn't there something that's talked about in podiatry about the role of ankle strategy, ankle stability, proprioception that can be gained through a brace? There's been studies that really for 20, 30 years that show braces impact and effectively reduce postural stability. The question really became, is there a product, is there a design that's beneficial for seniors? Because obviously putting someone and locking their ankle joint in a standard Arizona style AFO doesn't work. You're going to lock them up. You're going to in fact increase risk for falling. And so again, that's where the function and the design of the brace was so important. And I'm going to highlight some of the features of why the more balanced brace really was the innovator really in the design from the beginning, but it has made some significant improvements that we'll show you in just a minute. And then, lastly, this was the study right before COVID that was done by a group of providers, both PTs, OTs, PhDs. There was a few podiatrists on that list that you can see below. But what we were able to identify in this study in performing this systematic review is pretty awesome. We were able to really demonstrate that lower extremity risk factors are integral in falls and, of course, in maintaining balance. And so I was really gratified to be part of this because there were many people in our profession who were vehement about us really not being involved in this, and that we shouldn't be using devices to address these issues. And so, after all these years, I'm gratified to see these really shown in studies and demonstrated in a way that's that validates the concept. And if you're not sure about the validation process, I literally put 3 of probably 30 articles that just really within the time period in which we've started talking about balance and AFOs and podiatry, going back to 2009, the number of articles and publications in podiatry have probably increased tenfold. And it's not because of me. It's not because of anything I've done. It's really because I think that people are putting the puzzle pieces together and realizing that not only are there huge lower extremity risk factors that we can address in our practice, but not only is it effective, not only can we use tools like an AFO, footwear, PT, OT, all of which I advocate all the time, but these are what's the bonus in all of this is that these are reimbursable at a very high level. And if you do a really good job, you're going to impact people's lives. You're going to keep them mobile longer, and you'll also help grow your practice. And of course, that's just an added bonus. So I'm going to highlight just again, these are some studies that have been done over the years. Another one in gerontology, fall risk factors related to foot and ankle. Lots of studies. These 3 that you see below: foot pain, reduced range of motion, toe weakness, toe deformity. And when you see these people come in your practice that are walking down the hall, we need to remember that these are the patients that oftentimes we're not even doing fall risk assessments on. That's why we're going to. These are patients that are really unsteady, just like we just saw there, and that could benefit from intervention. You don't go too fast. And just stay close to the wall. And again, these are patients that oftentimes walk into our offices and we ignore. These people have clear and obvious gait deficits and deformities, weaknesses, things that don't work right. That's why they're using canes and walkers. And that's why I think we can have a huge impact in these people's lives. And when you look at the dollars and cents of this, prevention is better than the cure. And what does it take? Well, it takes risk assessment, which we'll talk about quickly. It means getting these people motivated and understanding of their risk. And then, of course, doing some type of intervention. Now, I would like to think that this study goes back to 2007. I'd like to think that this has grown. In fact, I would venture to say I'd love to see an updated version of the study where podiatrists, I think, have really taken on more of a role in fall prevention and in multifactorial fall prevention clinics. But the bottom line is that there's a million miles ahead of us where we need to be more involved as not only podiatrists, but also as providers of lower extremity care. And that's PTs, OTs, CPEDs, COs. I mean, we're all involved in enhancing mobility. And most of you on this call, I don't have to convince you that bracing can enhance and improve mobility. It's taken some time to get that concept across in podiatry, because we're not as intimately familiar with bracing. But I will tell you that it's important that we understand that we can have a role in this process and be effective. And if you weren't, really, aware of just how impactful this is, every 20 minutes someone dies from a fall. And I have to remind some of my patients sometimes when they walk in and they're coming into the clinic to have their nails done, or because they have heel pain, or because they have a sore toe, and when I talk to them about balance, they're sometimes confused and say, "Well, I didn't come in for that." And I oftentimes have to remind them, Mrs. Jones, the mortality rate for toenail fungus is pretty low. The mortality rate for plantar fasciitis, really low. The mortality rate for you falling and landing on your head and ending up in a nursing home, really, really high. And so I have to remind them these statistics, that every 1 second an older adult falls, and every 20 minutes someone dies from a fall, and the costs are enormous. And so again, I think there's been more and more movement and incentive, more than ever, to get involved in this concept. So, what can we do as podiatric physicians, as orthotists, prosthetists, as CPEDs? Well, we have an opportunity, I think, to address, people's pain, their abnormal mechanics, because ultimately that's what I think I'm doing in using a brace for balance. What am I doing? I'm correcting abnormal mechanics. It's nothing magical, nor is it some ego trip that it really is a matter of, we all know that the way you address mechanics, or abnormal mechanics, is through orthosis. So as podiatrists, we get the idea that orthotics do that. It takes us a little bit more thinking about things to understand that an AFO is an orthotic plus some. So what we're doing, and what I feel like we're doing, is we're addressing abnormal mechanics and weaknesses that are clear risk factors for falling. And so we have to screen, we have to assess patients, and there are really, really exciting tools on the horizon for us as providers in better assessing and stratifying these patients, and giving them scores. I'm just mentioning one that we're kind of excited about, that you may see more about in the future, and that's a program called Safe Balance, an online risk assessment program that's really effective. We're beginning to kind of explore that really as a tool to recommend. But what's important is that we understand falls happen for a lot of reasons. And when we intervene, we're going to not just intervene with a brace, we're intervening with PT, OT, shoes, education. And the more risk factors that we address, we're going to have, of course, a more impact on these patients. And really, the cornerstone of effective falls prevention is identifying modifiable risk factors. And there are plenty. If you just think of the things that cause foot pain, think of the things that cause abnormal gait. What causes a lot of abnormal gait? Pain. What causes a lot of abnormal gait? Weakness. And it just so happens that the number one indication for use of a brace is weakness. Now, what we have to be careful about, and what I'll demonstrate here in just a second, is that when you use a brace for someone that's old, or someone that's a senior, or someone that has really bad neuropathy, I use the more balanced brace for 40-year-olds who can't feel their feet from their knees down. Those people are oftentimes the most grateful and the ones that benefit the most. But in many cases, these are seniors. We cannot put these people in heavy, stiff, and non-flexible devices. We have to make sure that they work and that they can bend their ankles and move in an appropriate way. I always like to show this slide because it's fascinating to me. This was a study done a long time ago, 2015, done by basically primary care doctors. It's a primary care doctor journal. And interesting, it lists podiatry intervention in this section here. And when you look over to the right, someone really bright person said, you know what podiatry can do? They can use orthosis, footwear, and foot and ankle exercises. And so I found this, after I had really, for many years been talking about that and trying to convince podiatrists to do this, and to see it in a family practice journal was ironic and paradoxical. And I still love to look at it because someone that wasn't a podiatrist figured out that, well, why aren't podiatrists doing more orthotics, footwear advice, and foot and ankle exercises for these people at risk for falling? And I think it's a great question. Now, what I'm going to do just very quickly, as we're kind of touching on this first point, and that is that does it make sense to use AFOs for balance? I mean, that's kind of the first thing we're talking about. And so the question, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through these studies just to highlight them, and maybe at some point we can come back in a future meeting and just maybe kind of zoom in on these. But gait and balance disorders among the top causes of falls. Gait and balance deficits lead to injury, disability, loss of independence. Gait and balance disorders, usually multifactorial in origin, require comprehensive assessment and of course, targeted interventions. That's what we're doing. Foot pain is a strong risk factor for falling. And lots of studies, of course, show how disabling foot pain can be and how it's related to falls. Pain and the risk for falls in a community dwelling adults. Gait and balance, plantar pressures in older people with toe deformities. And this, one of my favorite studies, goes back to 2006. Abnormal gait predicts greater risk of falls, dementia, institutionalization, and death. So what should we be doing? We should be really paying attention to people who have gait deficits, especially if they're older. So abnormal gait is really one of the easiest risk factors to identify and intervene with. And when you look at the study, it says identifying gait abnormalities early may help identify high-risk older adults, provide a window of opportunity to institute intervention. And that's what we're doing in this system. So 35% of people in among non-institutionalized older adults, 35%, which I think is a low number, have an abnormal gait. And sometimes it's a variety of different gaits. I just showed you a video of a very abnormal gait. And gait disorders are detected in approximately 25% for those in their 70s, like early 70s, and 60% of those over 80. That's a lot of people, and I think those numbers really don't lie. I'm going to just show you this one video. I have a number of these that I'd like to show, but I'm just showing this one tonight, just to show you this patient already has a gait deficit. He's got a limp, and it doesn't take much for these folks that have a gait abnormality to lose their balance. And I just wanted to show you just a live, real example of that. We have to, of course, understand that people that have multiple risk factors, we need to help more. The risk range from 12% with no risk factors and 100% with 3 risk factors. Now, I will tell you, the patients I'm doing risk assessments on have way more than 3 risk factors. And according to the study, if you have more than 3 risk factors, you're 100% likely to fall. And I don't know if that's true, but it's probably close. Mobility is vitally important, and putting in place interventions to improve mobility is vitally important for the quality of life. And if you want to know one of the easiest abnormal gait measures to see and visualize, it's slow gait. And this particular study highlighted a fascinating correlation between slow gait speed and mortality. And again, it's a great indicator to identify people at risk. All right, why do people fall? And why are AFOs beneficial? Why does it make sense? Because the number one risk factor for falling in this particular study was muscle weakness. And they looked down number 3, gait deficits. 4, balance deficits. Folks, these studies again point to the fact that we can intervene, we can address muscle weakness and gait deficits through orthosis. And that's why, really the way we should be addressing falls in our clinics is not through just a single brace, not just through writing prescription for PT and OT. It should be a comprehensive approach, one that includes addressing the deformities through some type of orthosis, utilization of a proper footwear, and then PT, OT. And that's ultimately what the Life and Balance program is about. That's why we promote it, and that's why we use it. So this program works well. But there are a lot of people, a lot of seniors will not be receptive, and that's why they need validation of why this is important. Having that poster on the wall, having brochures, really helps with this. But again, a lot more can be talked about how to overcome patients' objections. But having this clinical algorithm in place guides intervention, provides opportunity for us to use our staff and address these patients effectively and thoroughly as a team. And kind of 4 components that are key. Number 1, doing an assessment. Number 2, utilizing PT/OT. Number 3, making sure we put in place measures to address their deformity through, again, DME, and that may be a walker, it may be a cane, maybe AFO, maybe a shoe, and then education. So again, what we should be asking with these patients is not what the disease is, but what combination of disease processes make sense or are involved. So what are we doing with an AFO? This is the way I explain it to patients. We are basically enhancing your root system. What is it that keeps a tree up when a storm comes? It's your roots. And so by wearing these devices, which are lightweight, flexible, we are basically enhancing your root system. And that's what we do. This is, again, just a highlight here. We'll talk about this in a future talk, but we do the tug test. There's lots of really cool ways in which we, again, do assessments in the office. So why is the more balanced brace, I believe, the industry standard? Because it does these things. And most of these have been shown in studies that have been done. We're going to reduce postural sway, reduce fear of falling, provide really kind of almost like a spring lift for them, because these are basically post-year spring devices. We're going to be enhancing joint mechanoreceptors to detect disturbances, which is basically what proprioception is, really, joint proprioception. We're going to increase postural control, improve abnormal gait, reduce fatigue, and that's ultimately what we do here. So from a design standpoint, we have the best product that really this brace has ever been. I mean, we have really enhanced its ability to provide stability in the rear foot. I'll show you how that does in a second. We have a single pullover strap, which makes it easier. There's a really good pad right over the shin that provides, again, some padding. But what's really exciting is that we have made this an all leather device. It's no longer a mesh type device, which was used for many years for the more balanced brace. We've shifted to an all leather device, which is, I mean, amazingly more durable. The single strap is easier. And I'm going to show you a few other things that we've done. First thing we did is we enhanced the heel. We created a really, an unprecedentedly significant extrinsic post. So when the patients are standing, if you put these braces down on the table and thump them or hit them, they won't fall over. They're gonna really hold up. You can see the heel, how we, again, provide that post to enhance stability in the rear foot. Really significant enhancement of postural stability when we do that. The second thing that we've done is, again, making it all leather prevents what you see in the left-hand side, which, again, lots of fraying, lots of mess. But again, I'm really happy to say I don't see that anymore. I dispense lots of these, and I really loved not seeing the lint. So the other thing too that we've done is we've built in, again, lots of padding. There's a layer of poron underneath the leather, so you're getting a lot of shock absorption. But most significantly, we are really adding stability to the arch. And I'm showing in the small picture to the right there one of the hundreds of knockoff products that keep coming out, what seem to be daily, for some low price. But when you look at these devices, the foot component is not remotely custom. I will tell you that was one of the things that when I partnered with Orthotica, I wanted these braces to have arches that truly anatomically held the arch. And you can see an example of that in this picture to your right. You can see that the arch is, and this is a patient who has pretty significant PTDD. We are loading up the arch, stabilizing the medial column, as opposed to just having them, basically completely collapse down with basically a knockoff. And we're gonna basically fit these. We're gonna have them stand, see how the fit is. We're gonna put them into a shoe. This is an anodyne shoe that we really like using for these products. Again, just an example of the program. This is a patient who's just picking these things up. You can see he's walking heel to toe. Note that we're not locking the ankles up. I'm going to show that again. A lot of people, again, are saying, okay, well, putting patients in a brace locks the ankle joints up. No, we're enhancing heel to toe motion in these patients. And this is one that I just dispensed today. I dispense several a day, but this is a patient who, as you can see here, he makes a pretty good turn, immediately felt increased stability. And as you can see, we're walking heel to toe. Now he doesn't have the right socks on. We're obviously going to need to get him in some socks that go up above the brace. But again, just lots of examples of how we can affect it. Now, note in the bottom picture there, these devices are flexible. If you take the forefoot in the back of the brace and you bend it, it will flex. These are not rigid devices. And the trim lines that we create by doing this keep it flexible, but at the same time enhancing proprioceptive feedback by the orthosis and, of course, the leg component. What are we trying to do? We're trying to, of course, reduce fear of falling by getting a really good anatomical fit. You can see in this picture, this is basically an extended MBB that goes up a little bit higher, but look at the arch and look at the heel. This is a really good example of the way that the MBB really is different now than it ever has been. And that is that we're really enhancing that plantar proprioceptive feedback, stabilizing the joint, yet not making it so heavy and bulky that they can't walk heel to toe. And again, it's easier than ever to scan for these using digital tools like this. We need to avoid bad casts. Again, getting a good anatomical cast is key. And these devices reimburse very well, PDAC approved for 3 codes. And I just wanted to show you where this brace has been. 2009, the product was, again, an all leather device. That's where it started. And then it really moved to kind of the mesh type product. Really, and the purpose of that was to keep it light and to handle moisture better. But really, in the past, since our partnership with Orthotica, the product is significantly improved, enhanced, as you can see there. All right. So, how important is footwear? This is our last point, and then we'll kind of cut to some questions and thoughts. I think it's vitally important to mention footwear because you can really be a master of making the perfect brace. You could do all the PT and OT in the world. If the patients are coming in with a Walmart special or a dollar store special with your brace or with your orthotic, it won't work. You have to have the right footwear to enhance balance. You have to have the right footwear for braces to work. And most of you that are on this call that are CPEDs, that are orthotists, prosthetists, you understand that better than anybody. You can have a world-class brace and put it in a crappy shoe, and the brace becomes pretty crappy. It's just not going to hold up. It's not going to stabilize the extremity. So you have to have the proper footwear. And in our practice, we have really, I think, we've done a really good job of making sure every patient that gets an MBB gets a shoe. And so, again, I'm going to just run through these studies because there's lots of them. The bottom line is that bad footwear will increase your chances of falling. And all of these studies demonstrate this, especially when you look at what your seniors are wearing into your offices and what they're wearing at home. This is what they're wearing at home. And again, we can do much better at educating them in that regard. What about walking barefoot? Wouldn't that, again, the immediate thought was, well, wouldn't that enhance balance? Well, these studies that you see here demonstrate that barefoot walking or in socks elevates fall risk, in some cases upwards to 10 times, depending on what they're in. So when I've reviewed studies, and again, looking at this topic of footwear and balance, there's several things that studies have shown that we need to look for. Number one, we need to make sure that we have a low-heeled shoe, not something with a huge, big Hoka-style, big, huge, bulbous sole. We have to keep these people down lower to the ground. Number two, we don't want overly soft shoes. You don't want the devices that just fold in half, that have a weak heel counter. That's the opposite of what we want. We want higher heel counters, which ultimately we're achieving with the brace. And so the reason why high heel counters work is because you're just enhancing proprioceptive feedback. Number four, good slip resistance. You need to have, again, a sole that can handle moisture. And some studies have talked about textures insoles, but the ideal shoe is going to be one that basically has a low heel. The patients are sitting lower to the ground, a thin, firm midsole, and again, a sturdy heel counter. Again, studies over and over again showing that, again, this is a really interesting study showing what people were wearing when they went to the emergency room with falls. 17 were in walking shoes, 8% sandals, 75% were wearing suboptimal features with the shoe. Again, it just makes sense. Falling in footwear, again, studies showing how important footwear is in balance. So what do we want to do? We want to have shoes that are low heels, good soles, firm heel counters, firm mid substance, wider frames. I like shoes that have a nice tongue opening so I can use the AFO in it. And that's ultimately what we want to try to achieve. So I could talk all day. In fact, one of the topics that we'll talk about down the road is what type of shoes work best for utilization of the Balance AFO. I'm showing you two of my favorites here. One is made by Propay, the other one by Anodyne. Both of them work really well. They have, again, some of the features that I mentioned. The Anodyne, probably the lightest shoe on the market, really lightweight, easy to use. Patients really like the way it looks. But ultimately, what we want to try to do is effectively preserve or enhance walking capacity, because when we do that, we're going to enhance quality of life and the quantity of life. Good footwear will, again, help facilitate balance. Poor shoe fit means falls. And again, lots of studies keep demonstrating that. So what do we need to do? And what is this all about? As we get down to the bottom line or at the end of the talk, I hope I've just given you a sense of why AFOs make sense for balance. What the studies have shown. I just did a quick survey of really a limited number of studies that have been done, but there's lots more I could show to you. Prevention makes sense. And ultimately what I've been advocating for years is that we stop watching these people come in after having fallen multiple times, that we stop ignoring our patients that are walking in with clear and obvious gait abnormalities. And if you want to identify someone really quick, that's someone that has weakness and a gait abnormality, anybody that walks into your office with a walker or a cane is not using that device for fashion purposes. I mean, they're using it because they have problems. And so those are my first patients that I start talking to about a plan to enhance their walking and to address the things that are making them limp or have an abnormal gait. One of the things that we have to understand is that if we aren't addressing falls, these patients of ours that I've shown you in these videos, they're not only going to fall, but they're going to basically decrease their activity. They're going to decline quickly because of fear of falling. And so by, again, addressing this with them, telling them to be confident, again, utilizing these services like PT and OT and other tools can be incredibly effective. And again, I think this is important that we just, again, we can talk all day about balance and how important it is. And every 20 seconds someone dies. But we need to start doing something about it and not doing nothing, which is what a lot of doctors and what a lot of offices are doing right now. There's just very few practices that really have a really clear and obvious plan for seniors at risk of falling. And I think that just doing something is better than nothing. And all it takes really for our patients to, and I remind my patients all the time, all it takes is one fall and they can lose their independence. And of course, we want to try to address that fall before it happens and not after it happens. So, Jason, Rich, guys, thank you for this time. I would love to address maybe some questions or maybe follow up with you guys as we close. But thank you very much for the time. I'm going to stop sharing if I can. There we go.
Great, John. Thanks so much. I know how passionate you are about it, and I know that comes across. And for me, it's I've enjoyed working with you now for it's coming up on a dozen years that I have partnered with you in this mission of really helping people. Some of you know this about me. My dad was someone who fell very frequently in the last years of his life, and as John said, it really only took one fall before he was incapable of living independently anymore. And none of the clinicians that were treating him intervened in any way. There was barely a risk assessment done about what was causing the fall. So, I have this personal commitment to it, as well as obviously a business involvement with it, and doing something matters. So, with that, I do want to ask if there are questions, please throw them out in the comments. We'll try to get to them. We are going to put all of the future webinar topics up on a landing page on our Orthotica website in the next week or so. And that web address is orthotica.com. And as I mentioned earlier, anybody who wants to get involved in a more detailed one-on-one conversation with Orthotica and potentially with Dr. Moore, all you have to do is schedule that on our calendar link that Rich has up. And if not tonight, then on our website, it's up on our website banner. I'll finish sort of our prepared remarks with just a couple of quick comments that I think if I can share a screen, I can codify it, but of course,
lower left.
I know the right button. I can't find my what I want to share.
Well, why don't I, while you're doing that, Jason, why don't I throw this question out for Dr. Bauman, I would think, Tammy Bauman. Can you suggest a brace to assist a patient with missing calcaneus? He must have no material in the heel or posterior ankle as this area breaks down. Needs something to remove all pressure from the rear foot. Asks for a device from forefoot to attach near the knee. Forefoot is normal and intact, and all toes are healthy. Does not have foot drop. Can you think of anything?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a few things just right off the top of my head, but obviously there are POTUS devices that we use. Those are not devices used for ambulation. However, there are devices that basically are used for ambulation that have the same design. In other words, they have a forefoot, and then of course they have the heel offloaded, and then of course the back, the brace comes up the back like a POTUS device. I could recommend some resources to some labs that I know that can put a device like that together. I think I want to be careful about mentioning specific labs in this talk, but if someone emails me, I can give them some starters. But if you know what a POTUS device is, Rich, you know what a POTUS device is. We use them to offload heels for ulcers. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of companies off the top of my head that make a ambulatory device that's designed that way. So if the patients are not, if they're not healthy, if they're not strong, if they're very fragile patients, they're not going to probably ambulate in this device. These types of devices would require some dexterity and some strength to walk with their heel offloaded. But anyway, that's a really good question. That's very challenging for sure.
Got another question from Dr. Miller. How can a brace increase proprioception?
Well, it's the contact with the skin. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you've ever wondered why basketball players wear sleeves over their elbows and their knees, I mean, those sleeves that go over those joints are enhancing so that it's stimulating the mechanical receptors in the skin, and it's telling the brain where the joints are in space. And so you see more and more shooters and guys that play basketball using those devices. Rich, you play basketball. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. But there are lots of studies that show that ankle braces, again, putting aside an ankle foot orthosis, but ankle braces themselves, because of the contact on the skin, create this proprioceptive feedback, which enhances motion, mobility, all those types of things. Yep. So an AFO will provide you proprioception from the plantar surface because of the contact of the AFO. And then, of course, it's going to provide that proprioceptive feedback along the back of the brace and then over the front of the ankle. So we kind of tried to figure out a way to enhance that proprioceptive feedback without locking the ankle joint. You can't put a senior patient in one of those X-strap lace-up ankle braces. They'll fall. They don't allow normal motion in the ankle. So, but yeah, so, and again, I can highlight, there's probably 100 studies that have shown that even orthotics themselves, just plain orthotics, enhance proprioceptive feedback because of again, those mechanical receptors in our skin giving that feedback.
Dr. Patel asked if you had a protocol for the patients that you would prescribe an MBB to. And then on the heels of that, we'll go back to Dr. Bauman. She wanted those codes again, the billing codes that you had put up. So we'll go with the protocol. You have a protocol for those type of patients that you prescribe an MBB to, and then the codes that you have.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to recommend is that for those that not only want the codes, but want a description of the codes and the compliance documents, to email and let Jason send you a document that Orthotica put together that has all the coding information. It has all of the compliance documentation, including the standard written order, the patient delivery form. As it's a turnkey, really cool package of stuff, and that'll be in that. So, Jason, is that okay to offer that for those that are interested in that?
Yeah, 100%. It also has a templatable chart note that Dr. put together, which I think most people that I've sent it to have really found that quite useful. So yeah, it's about a dozen pages of all the different forms, the codes, the treatment objectives, and I'd be happy to email anybody that reaches out. My email address is jason@orthotica.com.
Here, I'll throw that in here.
And just real quickly, that protocol. So if you noted that, you remember that poster I showed, it had kind of three components to it. So my protocol basically is, number one, quickly and easily identify those at risk. And I've been doing this for a long time, but you don't have to do this for a long time to identify people at risk. I mean, in most podiatry practices, probably every other patient, if they're over 60 years old and they have an abnormal gait deficit, or abnormal gait, if they relate a history of falling, or if they relate basically being unsteady, if they're using a walker or cane, that's just low hanging fruit. Someone walks in a walker, it's easy. I mean, you don't have to think. I mean, you know what I'm saying? If they're using a cane, they're not using it, to look like, Charlie Chaplin. They're using it because they need it. So identify the patients. And the key is to do a very quick and easy fall risk assessment. And we have been working to try to streamline that to make it as objective and powerful as we can. But right now, the CDC recommends basically doing a gait assessment, a tug test. And I have, and again, most people can do a tug test very quickly and easily. It's if they can walk a certain period of, if they can walk basically 10 feet in under 12 seconds, they pass. If they're over that period of time, they fail. It's really easy to do. And basically what I do is I implement that 3-pronged approach. I recommend a balance device, identify what their underlying musculoskeletal problem is. Many times it's weakness, slightly drop foot, slow gait. So I'm going to put in place an orthotic, an orthosis device, the MBB in this particular case. I'm going to recommend PT and OT, and then I'm going to make sure they have the right shoe. And that's my protocol in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. That's good. We got one other question here, Jay, before you could throw up your slide if you found it by now.
I did.
Which I imagine you did. I guess Dr. Vasevnia, if I said that correctly, concern about the design impact on the windlass mechanism disturbance. Could you elaborate or put your 2 cents on that issue if you find any impact with that?
That's a board's question that goes back to podiatry school. And I know what the windlass mechanism is, and ultimately, we're basically improving. Like, for instance, if you have a patient that has hallux limitus or that has any kind of metatarsophalangeal joint pain, which many seniors do. I mean, many seniors have forefoot pain. And we just looked at 50 studies that said that foot pain connects itself and relates itself to falls. So we're going to basically improve the range of motion of the first ray with an orthosis holding their arch up. I mean, how do you address, a windlass mechanism? I mean, ultimately we use orthotics. Now, I will tell you that obviously many people have hallux limitus, hallux rigidus, metatarsalgia because because of poor shoe wear, lack of shock absorption, and really the whole over flexibility of their shoe. I mean, those are the things I equate to an abnormal windlass mechanism. So what I would say more than ever in the time I've been using braces, Orthotica has kind of fine-tuned the ability to make an AFO that actually goes up in the arch. I will tell you in all transparency and honesty, previous incarnations and most of the quote-unquote balanced devices out there, I mean, the foot just flattens down when they step. And in that regard, you're not going to get any benefit whatsoever in the first MP joint. And so I think that if I have those types of patients, they're going to benefit from this. But I have to make sure, like when you're putting this in a shoe, you need to make sure that the part of their foot that's not, obviously part of the foot's not on the brace. You have to make sure that there's something in the shoe to provide some shock absorption in the forefoot, because again, the forefoot, the first MPJ head is not on the brace. It stops basically at the sulcus. So, but if you open up a textbook, if you go back to root, orient, and weed, going way back, orthosis and stabilizing the medial column is how you enhance and improve the windlass mechanism in the first MP joint.
We got one question from Dahlia. Hi, Dahlia. Nice to have you here. Dahlia Zwick, what's the cost of the device and what's your experience with Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement?
Okay, really good question. I'm going to let Jason handle cost things because that's kind of connected to what he's going to give to folks. But I've been billing these to Medicare and every insurance provider that exists for 20 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's started doing this in 2009. What are we at now? Isn't that 20 years?
Yeah.
15 years, something like that. I have patients who are literally on their third or fourth MBB, lots of them, that do their 5 years because there's a 5-year rule. I mean, so every 5 years you can replace the device as long as you document. Of course, it needs to be replaced. Mm-hmm. But the only challenge that's new, Rich, and you know this, and actually, Jason, we have a specific talk. We have a specific lecture on this topic, and that's same or similar. Mm-hmm. All of these devices are covered, and what we've done for you is provided all of the right language, the tools, the things that the insurances want you to document. All of that's in the information Jason was just talking about. But they all are reimbursable, and this device is PDAC approved, so it does have 3 codes that are approved. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's not any DME device right now that you don't have to be mindful of same and similar. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't, without getting into that, because I want to save that for a whole topic. A lot of doctors have stopped ordering AFOs. Yeah. Because of same and similar. Right. And I, as someone who dispenses literally hundreds of braces, maybe hundreds of braces a year, many of them are getting dinged with same and similar, but we know what to do with them now. Mm-hmm. We know how to go back and document and create the correction, the documentation they need. And there has, I think, of the 80 same and similars that we've had just this year, I don't think we've lost a single one. There's not been one that we haven't been paid. Mm-hmm. But you have to have a team. I don't do that. You have to have a team that can recognize, okay, this is that same and similar. Here's what we need to, in the chart. This is what they're going to look for. We know exactly the wordage that they're going to need to overcome that same and similar challenge. But other than that, it's just regular. I mean, if you've got someone that's on a Medicare Advantage plan, they're going to sometimes have a deductible. And you have to address that. Mm-hmm. If they have an 80-20 plan, I handle that in a particular way in my office. I do not let insurance or copays or deductibles impact the patient getting it. I can work with them on that. I work with patients on that. in legal and ethical ways. I don't ever tell people, oh, I'm going to write this off or do that. There are, and again, we'll save this for another topic, Jason, for our reimbursement talk, but there are really ethical and appropriate ways to overcome the challenges with deductibles and copays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Dahlia, great to see you on the talk, and thank you for the question as well. I'll give you just a couple of the numbers involved. The 3 codes that have been assigned to the MBB, depending on your state. In New York, the reimbursement, I think, is closing in on $2,400. That's for bilateral bracing, and MBBs are almost always prescribed and dispensed bilaterally. And the cost on that is it's $350 per side, so $700 on the cost side. $2,400 on the reimbursement is a fairly typical financial outcome of presenting this solution to patients in clinic. Some states are, John, I think Kentucky's a little bit lower. It might be like $2,200 in reimbursement, but it's still, when we think about Medicare broadly, I think this service is generously reimbursed, just given the amount of effort and time exerted by staff and the clinicians. It's been that way for the whole of the dozen years that we've been involved with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, everybody's interested in codes and everything else. Bring it all up, Jason.
Yeah, so I think the best way to get all the compliance information, as I mentioned earlier, is just to email me. I've gotten a few already on the call. I'll send those out, if not tonight, by the morning. Jason@orthotica.com. Really, I just want to call mostly attention to what we're going to be doing in the next couple of months. But it is, I think, important to not only just talk about the science, but also the timing here, why it matters now. And we are really in the middle of probably a generational change around our reimbursement and healthcare delivery in this country. And while in the past we really haven't paid for prevention, there's a lot of models and a lot of ACO type of opportunities where we're finally getting around to preventing the fall or preventing the diabetic wound rather than just paying for the treatment of it. We're also dealing with a demographic in this country where more and more a higher percentage of our population is elderly. 10,000 people a day for the last 10 years have turned 65. That'll continue for another 10 years. So if you're not already treating a lot of seniors, you will in the future. Their percentage of your patient population is likely to grow. And finally, because of the reimbursement associated with providing these services, it's a very financially meaningful ancillary service that you can add without adding any other overhead to the practice. And that really does enhance practice valuations. These are self-evident. By doing this, you're going to really generate a significant benefit to your patients. You're going to change their lives. And you're all healthcare providers for that purpose. This is a very striking way for you to be able to contribute to the well-being of your patients and at the same time really enhance the financial performance of the practice. Dr. Moore mentioned our Life in Balance program. We showed these earlier. I just want to reiterate that these are available to anybody who wants them free of charge. The poster on the left, it's quite large. It's going to get noticed either in reception rooms or treatment rooms. And then on the right, the front and back of a trifold handout that really is very useful in having a conversation about the potential for a fall with either a family member of a patient or a patient themselves. And finally, these are just some of the topics that we've been toying with over the subsequent months. We will do compliance. We'll talk about the business side of it. We're going to talk about more of the studies. Dr. Moore tried to keep this a little bit to a high level tonight. We're going to take a deeper dive there. We're going to deal with staff interventions and their role and how they play such a vital role to incorporating and introducing this into the practice. And there will be, as I said, in the next week or so, a landing page on our website that you could sign up for any of the subsequent meetings. Something that would be helpful for us is to know more about what you want to learn. We put this together based on our internal review of the questions that we frequently get. But frankly, if you provide us with more information that you would like to see or questions that you have, we can alter or expand this series and really be responsive to the things that you care about. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing.
We just had another question pop up from Bridget Edelman. Hi, Bridget. I'm glad you're here. Do you like the flexible device better than a solid plastic AFO for balance issues? I think we spoke to that, but obviously the more balance base has that flexibility. So you might want to speak to that as well.
Yeah, Dr. Moore spoke a lot about that. I just want to add, the two things that really provide the level of flexibility on the sagittal plane is the thickness of the polypropylene that we use in the brace. And it tends to be a little bit thinner than a traditional gauntlet. It varies by the weight of the patient and the size of the foot, but basically it is thinner than other more controlling AFOs in the sagittal plane, but also the trim lines. If you think about a posterior leaf spring, really what provides for the flexibility is the fact that the trim lines are so far posterior that it functions as a spring. So it does load and then release that energy. And an important question that your senior patients are going to have, because they may be fearing too rigid an AFO, I won't be able to drive. This is flexible enough that you would have no interruption or concern about somebody driving while wearing the brace.
How about for drop foot, Jason?
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Moore speak about that.
Yeah, there are clearly cases in which there's more extensive of a drop foot, and in those particular cases, you can extend the MBB and add dorsal assist. I mean, I do that all the time. Now, clearly, there are cases where there's spasticity, and if the patients have spasticity, like with a stroke or some other problem like MS, going with more of a solid device with a more of a locked ankle with a full foot plate would be indicated in that case. In general cases of the average senior, adding a full foot plate, making the ankle solid ankle does not enhance balance. Those are things that I would avoid in the general senior population. I don't ever extend the foot plate out full the whole way. That actually will, you'll have patients tell you, I feel less balanced. Mm-hmm. So having part of their foot on the bottom of the shoe is really helpful to, again, give them the sense of stability. But I mean, clearly all these patients are different. I have patients that on one side have more of a drop foot than do on the other. So I will actually have an extended device with a dorsal assist on one side and a traditional MBB on the other side. So you have to, I definitely don't recommend treating all these patients, no matter what they are, with MBBs. I mean, clearly there's lots of other indications for modifications. Now, I do think that, adding or just extending the MBB back up to the calf, you're going to get a longer lever arm. You're going to get more of a pickup. And in some cases, I'll add the dorsal assist. If it's a really flaccid foot, I may extend the foot plate. Like if they're really dragging, I'll extend the foot plate. But generally for balance, you don't lock the ankle joint up.
Thanks for watching. Give us a call at 888-895-1305 or schedule some time with us on orthotica.com.